We're joined again for our weekly chat on KWAT with the governor of the great state of South Dakota, Governor Kristi Noem. And Kristi, it was last week that the legislative session kicked off, and one of the actions taken out in Pierre was the Senate State Affairs Committee approving your Fairness in Women's Sports bill. I want you, if you can, just to review and explain exactly what this bill, if passed, would do, why it's important to you, and maybe any reaction of the Senate State Affairs Committee giving nearly unanimous support to that bill on Friday.
Well, this bill just ensures that girls have a level playing field in sporting competitions. You know, there's a lot of different competitions that our kids compete in where it doesn't matter what their biological sex is, academic, debate, things like that. But when it comes to other competitions, especially ones that involve physical activity, there is a difference between boys and girls, and this bill would ensure that only girls play girls' sports and that they have a level playing field to where they can be successful and achieve. So years and years ago, Title IX was passed that created opportunities for girls to have sporting events. This bill is just ensuring that that's protected here in the state of South Dakota. So it's been a conversation for quite some time in our state for the last couple of years. This bill is one that is drafted much better than the one that came in front of the legislature last year that I recommended amendments to that they refused to accept, but it does codify into law the executive orders that I signed last year that ensured that we only had girls playing in girls' sports. So, you know, for athletic competitions, common sense tells us that boys have an unfair biological advantage, and this bill ensures that girls will play, and if someone does not make a team while a biological male makes a team, it doesn't insert the state at all. What it does is it allows a private individual to sue for the right to play that sport, not necessarily to pay. So it doesn't create a big litigious environment. What it does is if someone missed the opportunity to compete, it allows them to challenge that in court so that they do have the opportunity to compete.
Governor, I'm sure it came as no surprise to you that the ACLU of South Dakota came out against Senate Bill 46. I want to read just a couple of notes from a press release they sent to me last week to get your reaction. They say this bill attempts to solve a problem that does not exist. They say transgender students participate in sports for the same reasons as other young people do, to challenge themselves, to stay fit and healthy and be part of a team. And then they went on to say in the news release that if Governor Noem really wanted to protect fairness in women's sports, she would tackle the actual threats to women's sports, such as severe underfunding, lack of media coverage, sexist ideologies that suggest women and girls are weak, and pay equity for coaches. Any reaction to those comments from the ACLU?
Well, they're missing the point, and it doesn't surprise me. They tend to oppose a lot of things like this and misconstrue exactly what this is. And this just has to do with giving women the opportunity to compete, to have that chance to win a scholarship, to possibly pay for a higher education, and go on and even play professional sports if they wanted to. And that is, they're trying to turn this into a political attack on individuals, and that's not what we're doing at all here in South Dakota. I used in my State of the State address an example of Allison Felix, who's the most successful track and field star in history, and has won multiple Olympic medals, the most ever in the history of the United States of America, yet hundreds of high school-aged boys have run faster times than her all-time best. And that's just because of the biological differences of their bodies. And one thing I would remind the ACLU is that years ago, they say it doesn't happen in South Dakota. It absolutely does. Years ago, USDA, the federal government, came in and tried to force us to get rid of boys and girls events at rodeo. And there are differences of boys and girls events at rodeo for a reason. They tried to eliminate all of that, and I stood up with our 4-H organizations and fought them and was the only elected official to help them at that time, and we won. We protected those boys' events. We protected those girls' events and made the point that there is a difference. So We've been doing this for years. It has happened in South Dakota. We've stopped it before, and this law will make sure that we have those protections in place for every single girl in the state of South Dakota.
Last week, Governor, the chair of the Sisseton-Wahpeton-Oyate tribe, Delbert Hopkins Jr., delivered the State of the Tribes address out in Pierre. You've got a Secretary of Tribal Affairs, Dave Flute, who is from that same tribe, the Sisseton-Wahpeton-Oyate. I'd like you to speak, if you can, to state government's relationship with the tribes in South Dakota, how strong it is, where improvements have been made, and maybe where there's more work to be done.
Well, we've got 9 tribes in the state of South Dakota. Chairman Hopkins spoke last week quite extensively about treaties and honoring treaties and the reality of what we have here today in the state of South Dakota. I'm always looking for more opportunities to partner with our tribes and with their governments. We have day-to-day work that we do every day together. They all have tax agreements with the state of South Dakota. We all have partnerships on sharing costs for roads and bridges under different jurisdictions. We worked hand in hand on the COVID pandemic, taking care of public health, even though a lot of the regulations and policies that they followed were that of their own tribal governments or the Department of Interior out of the federal government. But we have law enforcement agreements where we help them with big events, and our highway patroller, they're partnering with them to enforce tribal law to keep safety. Again, I would remind people we are only allowed to partner when the tribe asks us to or is willing to sign legal agreements to that. And we also have partnerships on different drug and addiction, issues that we deal with in our tribal reservations, and then child protection services, social service programs, and treatment facilities happen on every one of our tribes areas and trust lands. So it's a day-to-day working relationship. I think a lot of times all people ever hear about is the discussions where we have disagreement, and that is very true. At times we do disagree on stuff, but as I told our tribal leaders recently, we probably agree on 80% of the issues, and we should be able to work every day on those and continue to build a relationship that is better for the people that live in our tribal areas and outside of our tribal areas.
Later this week, Governor, you're going to be speaking along with the Tourism Department Secretary Jim Hagan at the Governor's Conference on Tourism out in Pierre. That's a great 3-day event, and it's quite amazing the story that South Dakota's Tourism Department has to tell, given what the country has faced the last, 2 years or so. I know you're very proud of our tourism department and the work they do, and I'm guessing you're going to share some pretty good news out in Pierre at that conference later this week.
Yeah, I am. We broke the state record for total visitor spending in 2021, which is fantastic news for our economy. It's our second largest industry, so we care a lot if people come and visit, and we care how much money they spend while they're here. It benefits our businesses and the families that is their career, and is taking care of providing hospitality to people who choose to visit South Dakota. We are making tourism even more of a priority in the state of South Dakota. Some of the dollars that we have, we will be plugging into tourism if the legislature approves. Some of that dollars will be specifically targeted towards tribal areas and rural areas that I think, a lot of people come to see Mount Rushmore. They come to see the Badlands, Sioux Falls, and our state parks, but they don't necessarily know about the culture and the history of our Native Americans and some of the gems that we have in our smaller towns. So we're going to tell that story more aggressively in our marketing campaign, and then also use some of the tourism dollars to recruit workforce to move to our state. We've got a lot of empty jobs in the state of South Dakota, a lot of opportunities for people, and we're going to use some of that marketing skill to make sure people in other states know about what we have here to offer for their families.
When it comes to addressing that workforce shortage, I know South Dakota has taken some steps to try and do that, one of them being the Build Dakota Scholarship. Can you talk a little bit about that scholarship program, how it trains and educates students in areas of workforce needs and attempts to keep them right here in the state?
Yeah, the Build Dakota Scholarship Program is fantastic. It's been going for a number of years. I believe it started under Governor Dugard. But it's a partnership. It's a partnership between a state scholarship program with industry to specifically match kids with careers that they want to go into, help them pay for their training and their education, and then they come and are committed to a business as soon as they are done getting that certification. It's a full-ride scholarship, highly successful, and what's great for us is these kids come out of high school looking for a scholarship like that plugs them into a local technical school, technical college that then plugs them into a business, and they don't leave the state of South Dakota. They're a part of our future and a part of our way of life, and they get to stay close to their families and do what they've always dreamed of. So it's a priority for me to always keep this funded, and I know that First Premier is still invested in partnering on the Build Dakota Scholarship, and so we're going to continue to do that with industry, and more businesses come on board the support system of this scholarship because they recognize the value it provides for them and their workforce.
Governor, this week marks the one-year anniversary of President Biden taking the oath of office out in Washington, and we all remember that one of his first acts as president of this country was the announcement that he was shutting down construction of the Keystone XL oil pipeline, which would have run through a portion of South Dakota. You were not happy, obviously, with that announcement and that decision. What has the fallout of that been in terms of our independence on foreign sources of oil or energy?
Well, I think everybody can just pull up to a gas pump today and see the fallout. It's coming right out of their wallets. President Biden, I remember listening to his inaugural speech and him talking about unity and bringing people together, and then his first actions were to cancel the Keystone pipeline, to get rid of the fireworks at Mount Rushmore that celebrated our nation's independence and freedom. And it wasn't a great way to start out. We started out on the wrong foot. But that Keystone pipeline, we had a lot of the infrastructure was all laid out and ready to be built at that time. We had the pumping stations built. The pipe is in South Dakota. The equipment was here. They were ready to start putting it in the ground. And when that stopped, it stopped all that economic activity. Those jobs ended. People who built out their hotels, restaurants to host these workers and people during this were just left empty and devastated. And these school districts and counties that were counting on that property tax revenue to come in and help them for years and years to come to fund their roads and bridges and keep their school buildings in place for their kids, just really lost out on what was a planned financing option for them to stay viable. So it pulled the rug out from under thousands and thousands of people and America, because now we're not utilizing friendly energy here close to home and in the United States and North America, but now we're relying on the Middle East. And we know for a fact that the people we're buying this oil from do not want America's success. They do not want our safety and security. They are not our friends, and instead we're bolstering their pocketbooks and emptying those of South Dakotans and Americans.
Well, since that presidential race in 2020, Governor, there has been, as you know, a lot of debate back and forth over the validity of the election results and the confidence of the nation's electorate in our voting system. Now, I'm asking this because we're heading into some very important midterm elections here in just a few months, where the balance of power in both the U.S. House and Senate will be in play. What's your take on where we are at in terms of the confidence of our electorate in our voting system and some of the bills that have been proposed that would make changes to where we're at right now?
Well, I don't see any bills I like. There's a reason that our founders gave us the election system, the Electoral College, the way that it was, and the security and confidence it's given us about our election system, I think, has withstood the test of time. We have no doubt we can look from state to state and see that there were things that, involved ballot counting or stuffing of boxes, different things that different states deal with. I blame a lot of that on these emergency orders governors were allowed to do that allowed them to conduct their election systems and in ways that they never have before. And we have to trust our elections. We have to trust that when people vote, that it has some integrity of being counted, and that we end up at the end of the day with leadership that the people wanted. So, I think that what's going on in Congress right now and talking about completely changing our elections, a lot of it I disagree with, because I think that a lot of people are making political statements instead of rather looking at what's for the good of this country, and that we do have to go from state to state and make sure that we know we can trust our elections. So this is something people are still debating. I think that every governor has a responsibility to make sure that their election system is sound and that people can trust it at the end of the day, that when we get the results after an election, that it is done correctly, right, and the people were heard.
Over the weekend, Governor Glenn Youngkin was sworn in as the new governor of Virginia. He's a Republican, and it's interesting, I saw that he is the first Republican in the state of Virginia to win statewide office since 2009. And I bring this up because you are one of the faces and voices of the Republican Party right now on the national scene. When you see a Republican winning a governor's race in Virginia and being the first Republican to win a statewide office in that state in 13 years, what does that say to you as a member of the Republican Party and where the party is positioned right now?
Well, I think it's wonderful. And when I watched the race that Glenn just ran, he focused on what the people wanted and talked about what the people wanted to. If you watched that election, and I did and talked to him quite often to see what we could do, to help and support him, people kept trying to divert him off into things the national press wanted to talk about and kept trying to divert him off onto personalities. And he stayed focused on what the people in his state said they wanted. They wanted somebody who gave them an education system they could trust, that their kids are being taught the truth. He focused on what was happening in our classrooms and in our communities. And at the end of the day, that's what governors do. What makes a difference for the people that live where you're in charge? And we have a lot of things swirling in the national news and world news. Good governors keep their eyes focused on the day-to-day work that makes a difference for people that live here, and know that those political pot shots are going to come, and people are going to attack you, and people are going to criticize and misconstrue and cast aspersions, but our job is to make sure that state government runs, that it runs on time, that we're focused on the people that live in our state.
Governor, thanks again for your time this week. We appreciate it. We'll chat with you again next week.
Absolutely, Mike. Have a wonderful day.